I often get asked what type of spirit is more powerful. And the soft answer to that question depends on the spirit lineup, but the real answer that I should be giving that I don't is if you need me to answer that question for you, you shouldn't be working with them. So, today we're going to be talking about good foundations in the occult, and we're going to be talking about how to start off your spiritual practice with a good, solid footing. I am Dave, the Amateur Magus. On this channel, I talk about the mechanics behind ceremonial magic, occultism, esotericism, and the mechanics of all things that can be found in dusty old grimoires. On this episode, we will be talking about good spiritual foundations. If you enjoy my content, feel free to subscribe, and if you really enjoy my content, consider giving me a couple bucks in the Patreon link down in the description below. We've got an ever-increasing backlog, and there's a lot of good stuff on the Patreon that I just don't advertise because I'm a terrible marketer. And if you're watching this on the Patreon, you have my thanks for your support. Back to the video. Now, this channel is very unique from a perspective of the fact that I'm really the only one publicly talking about the mechanics of occultism, by and large. And the reason for that is because a lot of times occult secrets are supposed to be secret. That being said, me talking about the mechanics of occultism does kind of lead to a bit of a chicken and egg situation where I'm talking about a lot more advanced topics than most people are familiar with and probably prepared for. Usually what you would be usually most people and most channels are just going to be like, well, all you need to do is the middle pillar and the LBRP, and you do that for 6 months, and then you reach enlightenment. And then that's sometimes what happens. And that is actually a paraphrased quote from Israel Regardie, believe it or not. He said that the middle pillar and the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram can take you to enlightenment, I believe, is what he said. And the reason he said that is because those are the 2 required rituals in Western ceremonial occultism, if you're doing Golden Dawn style, or Golden Dawn adjacent, that are required for good spiritual foundations. And why is that? Well, the reason why is because the lesser ritual of the pentagram, among doing like 15 other things, banishes outside influences from you so you can be more centered if you're doing the lesser ritual of the pentagram. You effectively are resetting yourself and you are building up your etheric body, and by building up your etheric body, you are able to more effectively do the work that you are trying to do. Which is actually kind of funny because of the rituals that Israel Regardie wrote a book about, he did not write a book titled The Lesser Ritual of the Pentagram. He wrote a book titled The Middle Pillar. And the reason for this is multiplexed, but of these 2 rituals, the lesser ritual of the pentagram is done before the middle pillar so that the middle pillar can work uninhibited by outside influences and spirits. Now, that being said, sometimes you're going to be doing the middle pillar after you've invoked something. That's because you want to help integrate it, and that energy of helping integrate it into yourself is a part of core spiritual development. Now, spiritual development as a whole is something that a lot of different occultists talk about in various different ways. I am of the opinion that you should be having a dedicated spiritual practice as part of your occult practice, because the most powerful magic is dedication to the divine. That really is like the most powerful form of magic that people don't talk about. Says the Hermetic Magician, which corresponds 2 spheres lower in the Sphere of Hod. And in case you're wondering, artistic expressions of magic are going to be in Netzach. But you're going to find, by and large, the most powerful spiritual practitioners are dedicated and working with something. They have some kind of dedication and some very strong relationship with God. God here meaning the big G, like big bolded G God, not like the lower pagan gods. It really just, when I say God here, I mean the Most High God, just, that nebulous concept that is going to be different for everyone. Other important spiritual practices that you should probably work on for your foundation are, don't overload yourself. This is something that a lot of people, especially in Western occultism, seem to misunderstand. You want to be... So the way to look at it is a lot of occult stuff, especially on my channel, angels specifically, are going to be high energy spirits Like, and when I say high energy spirits, I mean they can burn you out if you work with them too much. The most notorious kind of spirit for this is actually the Enochian angels, which are basically like, if you go into Enochian magic without the proper protections, it's basically like just barehanded, both hands firmly gripping the high voltage power lines, and then just saying, okay, that's what we're gonna do. You really do need some amount of spiritual protections when you're working with that kind of stuff. That's why the ancients had spiritual lamens, and the lamens were to protect you from the spirits. Specifically the high-powered ones, and these high-powered spirits are going to burn you out if you're not careful. And what does that look like? Well, it's different for every spirit. If you're working with angels all the time, and then you're working with benevolent angels and you call them up full Monty, what'll happen is it'll kind of turn your third eye into a bit of a light bulb for a bit, and it will just shut down, and you will just stop visualizing, and you'll be like, what happened? And then you will hear, yeah, you kind of fried a little bit. You need to take a break, and you need to calm down because you've been doing this too much. That has happened. I know that this has happened to a couple people, myself included, where it was basically like high exposure camera footage, and then just kind of your third eye goes blank because you're seeing way too much energy. Going along with that, you should have some kind of dedicated order by which you're working with whatever kind of spirit you're working with. And when I say kinds here, I mean like if you're working with elements and your system works with elements, you should be doing it in the lowest element first, then going up. And the reason for this is because it, one, reinforces your energetic body to be able to withstand the higher elements, because again, higher elements, higher energy, more spiritually dangerous, and you need to be able to withstand it. And when I say withstand it, I want to just kind of make this metaphor. Think of your spiritual body as a submarine going down into the depths. You want your spiritual body to be able to go to whatever depths you're trying to get it to withstand. Now, if your spiritual body is compromised, or if your spiritual body is incapable of withstanding the spiritual pressures of whatever you're trying to do, you will have problems, and it will normally affect you physically. Physical manifestation of spiritual problems is like the body's way of saying, hey, you've been doing like spiritual stuff that is fucking you up. You need to calm down. You need to chill out with this. And eventually, if you're lucky, and or if you get to a certain point, you will naturally be corrected in this regard. The spirits themselves will be like, okay, you have been fucking up. We're going to tell you how to not fuck up because we don't want to see you implode like a submarine. You're also going to want to take an ordered approach for planetary powers, and the reason for this is because there is I think I've talked about this a couple times on the channel, but there's a difference between elemental powers and manifesting and working with them too much, and planetary powers. What ends up happening if you work too much with an elemental power is it will eventually start to decay, and that's a problem. Because the elements are already in the physical plane. They make up the physical plane. If you look at the Tree of Life, Malkuth is said to make up all of the elements, and the planet that is associated with it is the Earth, but also the elements are here too. The thing about the planets is that in order to get the planetary influences down, they need to come through the sphere the sphere of Yesod and the path of Tau, and they need to come through basically a gigantic spiritual pipe. But the problem is if you call up too much of one planetary power, and the amount you're going to be able to call up is different from person to person. For example, some people are better at calling up Venus, and some people are better at calling up Jupiter. Some people are better at calling up solar powers, and some people are better at calling up mercurial powers. It's going to differ for person to person. But if you call too much of one planetary power up, the only way to get more of that planetary power is to increase the size of the pipe. Now, the problem is the pipe does shrink over time. This is, the whole concept of the thinning of the veil. When the pipe is small, you can only get a little bit out. When that pipe expands, it expands for all the planetary powers, not just the one you're calling up. So you end up having a deluge of other planetary forces coming through. This is the reason why you want to do it in an organized, and this is really what initiation is for. Initiation in ceremonial systems 9 times out of 10 when you're doing like a Golden Dawn or a Thelema style initiation, what you're doing is you're acclimating your spiritual body to these different energies and making it so you can control them and that they are familiar with you and you have a relationship with these planetary powers. Maybe you start out reading about occultism and you start by thinking, wow, this like Saturn is really cool. Like I like the discipline and I like the whole black aesthetic of Saturn. And then you work with Saturn and Saturn tells you, look, you are not compliant with me at all. I know you understand the aesthetic. That's Saturn of Venus. Yeah, you want to actually go work with Mars. You actually want to go work with Mars. That's more what you want to do. And you should probably be like, I'll show you where to go, but you don't want to work with me after you're done with your initiations. You want to work with Mars more than me, right? And that relationship will change, and you will talk to the planetary powers, and your relationships will change, and that's a really important part of it. Is like Western ceremonial initiation is all about developing relationships, developing an understanding of these forces, and having firm foundations so that you can withstand the spiritual energies of them. Now, the notable thing I want to talk about right at the end here is going to be Enochian powers. Enochian powers, a lot of people will read Golden Dawn material and they will hear horror stories about what Enochian stuff they should and shouldn't do. And I'm going to just say that Enochian, if you're doing it in an evocationary manner, should only be done de-purist. Go look up Aaron Leach. He has wonderful books on those. But scrying the Aethers and the little bit of Enochian god names that the Golden Dawn put into like their Watchtower ritual, the opening by Watchtower, which will get its own video at some point, I swear. The opening by Watchtower ritual has some Enochian in it, and it also has a lot of Enochian in the Supreme Invoking ritual of the Pentagram, as well as at the end of the analysis of the keyword, there is 4 Enochian god names that are on the Tablet of Union. Those are all fine. Those are mild enough Enochian to where it's not actually going to be a problem. But if you're doing like full-blown, I want to evoke, which is a standard Enochian name, by the way, that is actually Enochian accurate, like the sounds, yeah, that's actually Enochian. Yeah, if you want to call it whatever the hell that is, yeah, you can use de-purist for that, and I would do a lot of research, because the wonderful thing is that the wonderful, wonderful work of Dr. John D. and Edward Kelly did go through, and he did catalog everything, like an absolute madman he was. That being said, I have been Dave, the Amateur Magus. Hope you're having a good day. If you're not having a good day, hope your day gets better. Take it easy.